Kia ora, Izzy, appreciate that. No mai, hara mai, ki te kōrero, ki te kōpapa o tēnei wā. Welcome to today's conversation to support the kaupapa of the International Creative Leadership Series. I will just begin us with a quick karakia and then we can begin. Unihia te pō whirimarama, tō mōkia te au, te au whatu tangata, tātai ki runga, tātai ki raro, tātai āhaurau, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. A quick translation: from confusion and darkness comes the light of understanding. From our understanding comes unity as people. We are interwoven with the above, the below, with what ties us together. We are interconnected, allied, as one, together. Kia ora.
Kia ora, JT. Thank you so much for that. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Kia ora, I'm Izzy Robinson. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the creative producer here at Touch Compass. Today I'm wearing a light gray button-up shirt, white framed glasses, and my long brown curly hair is tied up in a bun behind my large black headphones. Behind me is a video background of a white wall with the Touch Compass logo in my upper left. So welcome to all of you for our 5th webinar of our International Creative Leadership Series. And we're so glad you can join us, especially today, which is International Day of People with Disabilities. So there's a bunch of virtual celebrations going on all around the world, and we're so glad that we can be part of it. So for the housekeeping, first of all, during the webinar itself, if you could please keep your microphone on mute, that'd be great. However, in terms of your video, if you want that on or off, totally up to you. Very relaxed, so eat, drink, come, go as you need, whatever you'd prefer. If your screen is just a whole series of names that you want to hide, you can either click in the top right corner where the 3 dots are and just go hide non-video participants, or you can select speaker view. That way it will just center the speakers and the NZSL interpreters. We have from Platform Interpreting 2 amazing New Zealand Sign Language interpreters who will be with us for today's webinar. They'll be interrupting every now and then to swap over, so we'll all just take a pause and wait for them, which is then when we get to the Q&A section at the end of today's webinar, of course, please feel free to turn your videos back on, unmute yourselves, come on into the conversation. Suzanne and Patty and Maria will be moderating any live conversations. If you've got a question, raise your hand. There's a hand raise icon function, or pop it in the chat. Now, myself and Zan will be checking the chat and reading any questions aloud, so you can put those in for everyone, or message us directly if you want to stay anonymous. Zan will also be moderating the Facebook Live chat. So if you've got a question out there, post it away. If you have any issues at all during today's webinar, again, send myself or Zan a message and we will fix it as soon as we possibly can. With that all out of the way, I will pass it over to Suzanne Cowan to start us off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Izzy. Kia ora. It's wonderful to be here today. My name's Suzanne Cowan. I'm part of the Touch Compass Artistic Panel, and I am a pale-skinned European woman with light brown hair. Today I'm wearing a black and white dress, sleeveless dress. It's very warm here today in Tamaki Makaurau. And I'm seated here in my apartment in my wheelchair, and behind me is a painting with 4 strips of color that I painted myself, and an oval shaped mirror is on the back wall. And I'm very excited to be here today with Patty Berne and Maria Palazzo of Sins Invalid, and I'd love you to introduce yourselves. So over to you, Patty.
I'm so sorry, I was muted, not realized. Let me start again. My name is Patty Berne, and I am the executive and artistic director both of Sins Invalid. Sins Invalid is a disability justice-based, let me pause before I talk about the organization. Let me give my visual description. I am a light-skinned Haitian and Japanese person. Haiti is in the island of Haiti and Japan, as we all know it. My hair is up in 2 buns. I'm wearing panoply of makeup and a white dress with little gold spots and a gold and gray necklace. My background is a white wall with the various necklaces hanging on a horn and a little fern print above it. I am on Ohlone land, unceded. We currently call it the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And I'm really excited and grateful to be here with you all. And I think I'll talk about Sins Invalid after I hear Maria introduce herself. Maria, take it away.
Thank you, Patty. And thank you, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here and to be joining Patty in this awesome conversation. Again, my name is Maria Palacios. I am a indigenous light brown skinned person from South America. My indigenous heritage is Incan, and currently I am residing in Texas. Actually, I've been here for like almost 40 years. And this part of Texas, it is the Sana-Coatecan tribe land. I have been a Sins Invalid performer since 2007. So the Sins Invalid is very dear to my heart. So it is a special honor to serve at the capacity of Spanish-speaking rich person, being that I'm a Spanish-speaking person, Spanish being my first language. So I am just thrilled to be here, to be joining Patty in this conversation. And yeah, I'll pass it back to you all.
Thank you, Maria. It's beautiful to have you here today. Very exciting to have you all here. And I just wanted to start actually and ask you, Patty, tell me about Sins Invalid. What does the name mean and where did it come from?
Well, for all the other people with disabilities, you know how there's a strange phenomena, and people who are non-disabled can really learn, have a learning moment here, where people might approach a person with a disability and pray over us as though we're broken or needing fixing. And it implies in many ways that, you know, there's a religious or spiritual connotation to our disability, maybe even as far as like the quote sins of the father being passed on to the, you know, sons and daughters. And, you know, other people have like a karmic understanding that, you know, we must have done something in our past lives, etc. And from our perspective, this is just unfounded and a manifestation of like kind of cultural bigotry against disabled people, both visibly disabled and non-apparently disabled people. So in many ways, that's an invalid concept to us, the idea of sins. And we, you know, that word invalid is kind of a double entendre because in English, we say, you know, or it's been said that people are invalids. I mean, one would think that that language has ended, but it hasn't. People still call, in the United States, people still will say someone is an invalid. And that is also a, you know, a really invalid and ableist term. So we thought it was a kind of, it rolls off the tongue quite readily, Sins Invalid, and you know, kind of implies and connotates some of those broader cultural conversations. And we also knew that our nickname would be Sins, which is kind of fun for us. So that's where it came from, just really playing with words and their meanings.
That's brilliant. And how long ago did Sins Invalid get set up? When did you actually start it?
We actually started Sins quite a while ago in 2006. Earliest conversations were in 2005, but in 2006. And at that point, we just did performances. There was no other movement building component. We did performances in 2006 and in 2007, and there was such traction, such a phenomenal audience response that we clearly had hit a nerve, so to speak, and a need. And people were asking us, do you do any political education workshops? Do you do, workshops with your artists, etc.? And really it was audience response that prompted the development of a more robust program. So now we have two different programs: our cultural program, which includes semi-annual performances and touring performances, our film, and a lot of online kind of creation. And actually we have two films now. And then our movement building work, and by movement we mean justice movement building. And that's disability justice workshops and collaborations, conversations that we've held across communities. And a book was recently published about Sins Invalid called Crypt Kinship. It's really quite exciting, and I feel really honored for the amount of attention that we've generated.
And why do you think that it did hit a nerve so much? Is it that these communities are not catered for? Is it that, it was finally certain sections of society were getting a voice? Why do you think it really struck a nerve?
Well, I think there have been very few organizations in the US, if any, that are led by disabled people of color, for disabled people of color. There are many disability organizations in the US that are led by white disabled people or by non-disabled people. And, we are small but mighty. We have been led by queer and gender non-conforming people with disabilities and disabled people of color, Indigenous people with disabilities, and Black people with disabilities from our inception. And I think that was quite novel. And the fact that we centered our bodies in pleasure, the majority of our performances rotated around disability and sexuality. And I think that was in 2006 and 2007, that was quite novel. I think now there's a lot more representation of people with disabilities, but at that point, there was much less. And seeing a person who's, maybe chemically injured or a chair user, loving themselves, referencing masturbation, being nude on stage, making out with another person with a disability, like those were not themes that people were used to seeing.
If we could just have an interpreter swap now, Patty, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, ready to go.
Okay, great. So in other interviews I've read with you, you talked about harnessing the power of the erotic for people with disabilities. So tell me a bit more about that. How do you harness that power? And also then how do you politicize that power?
But yeah, how do you harness the power of the erotic on stage?
Oh my gosh. I think that the very first thing, me personally, as an artist, as a disabled, brown, queer artist, in order to gather and harness that force of sexiness on stage, for me personally, the most important thing is really believing it. I cannot convince the audience that I'm sexy unless I really believe that I'm sexy. So for me, the ability to really feel it, and it's something like this fire that just rises. And you know what, I realized that I did not give my description of myself when I introduced myself. So since I have this kitten climbing on me, I think that this would be a good way to just describe myself, if that's okay. I am, like I said, I am a brown, light-skinned person. I have a brown hair, and it's long, but it's up on a ponytail, and I'm wearing a white big headsets around my ears, and I'm wearing a black embroidered shirt, and I'm sitting on a bed. There behind me, there is a beige looking, very plain, boring, what you call it? Bed.
Headboard.
Yeah, headboard. And a pillow. I'm sorry, a child just popped in behind me. Please move, baby. Okay, Mom. And okay, yeah, and a kitten on me. So back to the question. Yes, in order to really connect with that sexy energy and project it on stage, for me personally, it was like really just having the ability to believe in my crib sexiness. And that is a process. And Sins Invalid is very much in many ways responsible for my ability to feel that. Like you had asked Patty, how did this happen? Why was it such a hit? And I think that it was such a hit because there was nothing like Sins before. Sure, disabled people have been talking about sexuality, but not from the platform of empowerment, not from a platform of sexy. It's always been presented through the medical model lens, through the broken bodies, only if you could be less disabled, then you could be sexy type of thing, and then you come this force on stage that represents the power and beauty of disabled bodies, just as we are, without having to normalize ourselves. And I think that's what made us so revolutionary. And for me personally, just knowing that I have the right to embrace my sexy, that I have the ability to represent and to share myself. Oh my, it's so powerful and so beautiful. So yeah.
And is it also political, Maria?
Absolutely, yes. I'm sorry, that was a part of that question. I think that just the very nature of living and existing and disabled, and as a disabled queer brown person, we become automatically political because we have to be political in order to exist and resist. Without it, we can't. Without it, we continue being oppressed. So just our very crip existence is political, just because we have to fight to stay alive. We have to speak up. We have to create change through everything that we do. So yeah, we politicize it by existing. We politicize it by rebelling. We politicize it. Art has so much power. Art is very political just in itself. And then when you add and tie it to disability justice, to the right to our humanity. So just the fact that we are alive and fighting for our existence and fighting for our rights is political in itself. And I think that Sins Invalid tends to add the aspect of art to its politics, and automatically that's what makes it extra powerful.
And what made you decide to be an artist? Or have
me?
Yes.
Well, you know what, for me, I think that I was born one. A language came super easy for me. I had polio when I was 9 months old. So for me, my artistic development started really early. But I don't think that I ever decided. It's just kind of happened. Now, with Sins Invalid took me to a whole different artistic level. I had already always been a writer, and I have been performing my art, but Patty and her vision and energy of Sins Invalid made me grow beyond anything that I personally thought possible. you know, it made me, and it allowed me the opportunity to really share myself just as I am. And also helped me enter a different zone artistically beyond spoken word, beyond the written word. Patty has gotten me to do things that I had never imagined myself doing, like dancing on stage, doing a striptease, just bringing my personal awareness of my art to the political level on stage, the recognition and the realization that my work through Sins Invalid is life-changing. It's transforming, not only for myself, but for the audience who is witnessing. Until Sins Invalid, like I said before, this disabled sexiness was such a myth. Like if you have seen the documentary, the Sins documentary, it opens up with me saying, those people have sex, and covering my mouth, you know, because that is the ableist reaction of the non-disabled world when they think about sex and disability. And we have grown so much since that beginning of putting sexy crip energy on stage, that now we have become about everything that has to do with disability justice beyond the right to our sexuality. Now we're completely political in every sense of the word, fighting for climate justice, fighting for everything that we are entitled to as human beings, you know, just really trying to put our humanity on the front page of our existence, because it continues to be so oppressed and so denied to us. So yeah, I truly, I love the work of Sins Invalid. I always tell Patty, I'm a loyal sinner, baby. I'm a loyal sinner.
I love it. I have to say the name really drew me to your work initially. You know, it's like, I couldn't think of a better name for a, you know, a disability-led performance company. It was like, oh, that's great. So tell me about the crip kinship. Patty, you mentioned crip kinship, which seems to be talking about some of the things you mentioned, Maria, you know, bringing into focus a lot of different political stances. Can you tell me more about the crip kinship?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of crip kinship, that's a tongue twister, really stems from the idea of crip community, and how, you know, we are, you know, I mean, we're disabled brothers and sisters and siblings and nibblings, and, you know, we have to, in order to fully realize ourselves as individuals, we have to recognize who our people are. And our people are other disabled, you know, Black, brown, Indigenous people, our queer kin, our kin that are, you know, locked up and invalidated, you know, our kin that are in nursing homes, you know, our kin that are, that have been, you know, harassed and held by police, our kin that are locked away in psychiatric institutions. For, you know, for so long, disability movements have tried to assimilate and say, like, you know, we're just like, you know, these bright, shiny, you know, like, you know, fake people almost. It's like a politics of assimilationism. And, you know, yes, we are that. Like, I believe wholeheartedly that we're brilliant and perfect exactly as we are, that we don't need, you know, to be any different than we are, to be beautiful and hot. Like, I think that we're, you know, beautiful and hot in many ways because of our disabled body minds, not in spite of, but because of. You know, we inhabit our bodies in a different way than able-bodied people, where we can't just go on automatic. You know, we have to kind of have an awareness of, you know, our bodies that, I mean, I believe is sometimes like an athlete's, you know, because we're constantly like having to, create new ways of doing things. We're constantly having to, feel our bodies to know what's safe, what's not. Anyway, so, to me, that's hot, like to actually see someone living in their skin, being creative, loving themselves and owning who they are. That's hot. That's super hot. And also part of owning who we are is owning our circumstances. And people with disabilities are targeted by violence, not because we're, quote, vulnerable, but because we have been deemed with an ableism as less than, as we've been deemed as having lives less worthy. And many people with disabilities in the United States have been subject to medical neglect or medical abuse. More than 50% of the people that have been assaulted by the police, including incarcerated, are people with disabilities. Just yesterday, I was watching a video of a man who was a chair user that was shot 9 times in the back for shoplifting, right? And this is not uncommon in the US. Like, these are common stories, and it's disgusting, but it's true. If he was a white, able-bodied man in a suit, they would have been like, oh, excuse me, sir, do you have something in your pocket? Or, I think there must be a misunderstanding. They would have tried to engage with him like a human being. But because he's a chair user, and he looked poor, they shot him in the back 9 times, thinking that no one would care. I mean, this is, again, I'm sure it's different if in countries where guns are not like running abound. And I'm sure it's different in countries where the police have less entitlement and more accountability. The US is pretty out there, to say the least, in terms of levels of violence that are considered considered within the norm. But as people with disabilities, we're subject to a lot of violence because of the way that we're not seen as worth living or worth saving in a climate catastrophe. So, we have to own all of our kin family, right? Our disabled family, our brothers and sisters that are locked up, in prisons or jails, or who are living, on reservations in the US that, don't have electricity, not out of choice, but because people are just kind of left to make do for themselves. People that are, in nursing homes, again, like there's a lot of folks with disabilities that are just, experiencing medical abuse and neglect. And that's part of our disabled family too, and we have to recognize all of our kin in order to be whole. So the idea of kinship is that, we are all connected, like all beings on the planet are connected, be they plant beings or, the fungi, oh my gosh, the water, we're all connected. And as people with disabilities, we share so many connections, in terms of how we occupy our body minds in really unique ways, and all the oppressions that we face as well. Both of those things connect us. both our creative ways of living and the oppressions we live. So recognizing that kinship, I think, is a part of crip culture. It's part of disability justice. And because we address this in our performances and in our politics, someone actually recently wrote a book about us called Crip Kinship, which was the sweetest. I mean, Shada Kafai, I've got to just send her so much love for, making this possible. She's a queer, disabled woman of color, and she is a professor at the University of Pomona. Yes, Pomona in Southern California. And gosh, I wish we had a quick picture to pull up, but oh, okay, it says she does. Yeah, we'll pull that up.
Thank you. Good to go.
Perfect timing. So when we have that, we'll share our screen quickly. And here we go.
Here we go. Oh, wow. Wow, that's beautifully illustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh no, it's not.
Love it.
And so right now the book is on tour. And so people, disability scholars and disability activists and disability artists like Maria are speaking on Zoom, along with Shada to kind of engage people with the content. And yeah, it's such an honor. It's really such an honor that we've partnered with fantastic artists, including Shada as a writer. So that's the idea of crip kinship.
Awesome. And tell me, who are your audiences?
Everybody.
Everybody.
I mean, anybody in a body is really our intended audience, because disability justice is not just about people with disabilities. It's about the ways that all of us are oppressed, but moreover, experiencing violence because of ableism. And how many people really want to work in the US? You get like a 50-minute lunch and 2 15-minute breaks in an 8-hour workday, right? And the expectation is that you work 5 days a week. And the minimum wage is not enough to live in the US in most cities, which is why we have such poverty rates. And who wants to work that kind of schedule, where it takes an hour to get to work, an hour to get back, and people are exhausted by the time they get home. So of course people just have time to turn on the television and just space out for an hour before they have to go to bed. That's not a way to live, So that kind of capitalist compulsion doesn't just oppress people with disabilities who can't conform by the nature of our body minds, but nobody really thrives under that circumstance, right? All of us suffer under capitalist production standards. Similarly, all of us, whether or not we're, whatever gender we are in, are suffering under cis heteropatriarchy. It's not, I mean, certainly there are different impacts for people that are, femme presenting, and different impacts for people that are trans or non-binary, and different impacts for people that are male presenting. But no one is really living their best life, having to conform to standards, gender-based standards. How many little boys can we think of that had the joy beat out of them? I mean, that's the sad reality of patriarchy, because we know the rates of violence against women. We know that in the US, the number one reason for death of femme presenting people is male violence. So anybody with a body wants, thrives best without ableism, thrives best without white supremacy, without the gender binary, without, capitalist domination. Like our bodies, our minds, our whole selves are most liberated when we are being respected and where we're living lives of dignity. So yeah, our shows are for everyone. You see how everything that we do is political, right?
Well, in a way it can't not be.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely not. And so with your performances, do you reimagine a world, a crip world?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's, and I just want to acknowledge and thank the person who's doing access support for me, Karina. So we absolutely imagine worlds where we are seeing into the future. Our most recent performance was called We Love Like Barnacles, Crip Lives Within Climate Chaos. And we know that, people with disabilities, we know that people with disabilities are, like, just bluntly, not included and centered in the responses that the state creates for surviving climate chaos. Even in a place as, seemingly progressive as New Zealand, I question with the amount of fires, that were happening, if there really was an integrated response for people with disabilities to get all of their needed equipment out, to get, all of their, their language devices, during an emergency, or if things that were lost were immediately replaced, for people with disabilities. And these are things that we need. It certainly is not the case in the US. And Maria, I wonder if you want to speak to that a little bit, just as someone that has survived so much, sexism.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, there's so much climate chaos, from fires to floodings, earthquakes, and disabled people are always being forgotten and left to die, left behind. It's a reality that here, Houston had an opportunity to experience recently. I live in hurricane country, pretty much. We have hurricane season, I think 10 months out of the year. And we have experienced, by the way, Houston is also, we have a large disabled population, and we are very extremely geographically huge. So moving from one end to the city to the next, is like really complicated, and we're disabled, and evacuation tends to be really difficult. If you have a wheelchair that weighs 300 pounds, or if you have any kind of medical equipment that during an emergency that requires evacuation, a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, that medical equipment, that life-sustaining equipment gets left behind. During Hurricane Harvey here in Houston 3 years ago, we had incredible stories of survival of Crips whose lives were pretty much left to survive on their own, or had to evacuate in ways that did not permit bringing with them the necessary equipment to help them pretty much stay alive and survive. We have stories of people who had to survive on hard plastic chairs for like weeks before they had an opportunity to get a loaner wheelchair that did not even meet their needs. I heard another story, just as an example, just to give you ideas of the kind of stuff that disabled people have to survive. There's an undocumented person here in Houston whose room flooded, and I say room because that's all he had. He lived in a very small space, and it flooded, and all of his clothes got wet. Everything. He had nothing to wear, and he had very little support. He was undocumented, and he ended up having to wear clothes that dried up with that dirty water, and he got an infection. Mind you, he's already in a wheelchair. He already has a spinal cord injury, and because he had to wear those clothes, he had no choice but to change. He got an infection, and they had to amputate one of his legs. So, in addition to already being disabled, he had to endure additional disabilities, and the stories go on and on and on and on. So disabled people endure circumstances caused not necessarily by our disabilities, but caused by the ableism surrounding our disabilities, because the non-disabled world finds it a lot of times easier to just let us die or not help us survive. And it's so easy for them to just wash their hands and say, well, we did everything we could, or their idea of saving us does not involve learning what our needs really are. I mean, ableism is pretty brutal. And in order to stay alive as a disabled person, every single day, we have to make choices. We have to make choices on that relate to our survival. Even if we're not in the middle of a hurricane, a lot of times we have to think, how am I going to eat today? When you live on benefits that keep you oppressed, your ability to really survive. I once heard that you cannot dream, you cannot thrive when you're drowning, because you have to keep busy just to keep your head above water all the time. And that's how disabled people, a lot of us are surviving this way. And I include myself because I can tell you firsthand stories of what that's like, what's being hungry, not having enough money for bills. And then, when you're dealing with crisis situations having to do with climate change and hurricanes and floodings and fires, and you've already been like this, just with your head above water, there is no way that you can gather resources like, okay, I'm going to have canned goods. You cannot prepare for an emergency when every single day of your crib life is an emergency. You cannot think about how am I going to survive a hurricane when you are living through a hurricane of ableism every single day of your disabled life. So yeah, it is extremely difficult. And one of the things, related to disability justice is that we survive by recognizing each other's value and each other's humanity. I don't think that I would be where I am personally, alive and being able to be where I am without my crib family, without other disabled lives who have been there for me, and then we're there for each other. That's how we stay alive. That's how we stay strong. That's how we basically survive. And that's what interdependence really is about. Disabled people, I think we have been punished by ableism so much that we have been led to believe that needing each other and needing help and basically just doing what we do to survive makes us weak, makes us disposable. And it's completely the opposite. The show that Patty was mentioning that we just had, We Love Like Barnacles, it is completely about that. It is about illustrating how disabled lives do whatever it takes to stay alive. How whatever it means, reaching out, networking, even without the resources. We were pretty much the inventors of before COVID hit and everybody had to be online. Disabled people were already connecting. We already knew what to do. COVID threw non-disabled folks into oh my God, what do I do now? Disabled people had already been isolated and oppressed to the point of having to build that network, that underground connection of survival and just crib existence. So yeah, I could possibly write a book about all the stories that I have known and witnessed and heard and survived, having to do with climate chaos and abandonment and just living like this. And sometimes with sharks around us, or crocodiles, depending on what waters you're drowning in. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting, you know, the rhetoric around, you know, freedom fighters and you know, and the big backlash against people's freedoms being restricted through the pandemic, which, you know, is understandable. But from a disability perspective, we encounter those restrictions every day. This is not new to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is like our everyday existence. And, you know, I just think, well, so, you know, I sometimes find it hard to have sympathy because it's like, yeah, this is what it's like for our lives. And now you're getting a taste of what it's like for us, and you're going crazy, you know. Yeah.
Welcome. I tell people, welcome to my world. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. If we could swap interpreters now, please.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to just, sorry.
Okay, ready to go.
Thank you. I just got excited because I wanted to interject, and Maria, you are so on point that, you know, a lot of it is about resources. And one of the reasons I think that Sins has had some traction is we have very high production values. I mean, even though it's a political performance, like we hold very high production values, and I'm a kind of stickler for that. Like from the beginning, you know, I wanted to hire, you know, people that were, you know, experts in their fields. You know, I can't tell a lighting designer, like I can't work a light board, but I can communicate to a lighting designer like what look I want, what emotions I want, you know, evoked. You know, I can tell a sound engineer like what, you know, what kind of reverberation should be in the room, or what kind of room tone we need. You know, I mean, we need to work with people who are, you know, skilled professionals in their respective fields, because those are all arts as well. And so we have high production values. It was basically run out of pocket for donated labor. All the funds went to the performances. You know, what we would earn one year would just go into the performance the next year for the first 3 years. And after that, we began to get some funding from arts funders in the US. And one of the main priorities that we had after that period was that artists would earn a good amount from their work. You know, it's amazing how many people expect artists to work for free, or work, you know, as though, you know, they're getting a, like, oh, you get to show your work, like, this is a great opportunity for you, you know, here's your $100, your $150, you should be glad, you know. And no, I mean, think about the number of hours that it takes, you know, think about the time that you're asking someone to take off of their day job, you know, think about like the food that people have to, you know, we think about like the food that people have to, you know, eat out when they're at the theater, you know, if they want to eat, and, you know, people can't cook at home. So, you know, from the beginning, we were like, okay, you know, we have to have a per diem for people if they're not at home. We have to pay artists, you know, like, and consider like what, you know, the number of hours. And so even back in the early days, we tried to pay performers, you know, at very, very good competitive rates. And now, I mean, I think we're continuing to do that. It's incredibly important for us to, you know, have artists and all the people that, you know, are working at Sins compensated justly for our labor. And, you know, it makes my job as executive director all the more like, yeah, I mean, I feel a lot of responsibility, you know, to make sure that like I'm educating the funders world. And we've had success in educating the funders world that disability is not a health issue. You know, we are a political sector. We have, you know, disability justice is, you know, an embodied experience. Disability is a political location, it's a cultural location, and, you know, it's a community location from which we organize. And it's also, you know, we hold with us an aesthetic. You know, we have very, like all of our body minds have a unique aesthetic in the way that we move and the way that we think, and we create an aesthetic collectively. So yeah, got to get the resources.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, have that quality of production, and
Yes.
yeah, so we're making excellent work.
I
I noticed that Lucy has a question here, and Lucy says here, Patty, it's lovely to see you. And with the disability justice scene, did you face any racist prejudice situation yourself when you were writing your blog?
You know, I've experienced racism, like, and microaggressions all of my life. I mean, you know, you can turn the television on and, you know, get insulted 9 ways, you know, a moment. And my leg is going numb right now, so I'm going to ask for access support. And that's another tenet of disability justice where, thank you, we don't need to be like ashamed of our access needs. You know, like other people like can scooch around independently. That's great. I'm happy for them. Like I can't, so I'm gonna ask for access support. And this is what it looks like. Anyway, yeah, I mean, racism is all around us, right? We're immersed in it. Some of it is communicated through the media. Some of it is communicated in our phone calls, you know, with folks. Some of it is communicated outright in person, you know, where people will, you know, just overtly treat us poorly, you know. And I mean, I can't tell, honestly, why someone will treat me poorly. If it's, you know, because I'm brown, is it because I'm a chair user? Is it because I'm female? I've certainly had people like drop change, literally drop change on, and I mean, I'm like, wow, that, okay. Like I was actually waiting for a cab. not quite sure what I mean, like there are people that are houseless that are actually seeking change right here on Market Street, you know, like in the main street of San Francisco, but someone is like tossing a quarter at me. Okay, you don't know what to do with that. But, you know, like that's between them and their therapist and them and their God, you know, like that's not my issue. And I mean, the level of, you know, like just male entitlement, you know, who will, it's just, there's so many microaggressions, you know, as well as outright acts of violence against us. I mean, I'm a survivor of sexual violence and a hate crime as an adult, 2 hate crimes as an adult. I have no idea, like people are just weird. And thank you, that's good. And when I was younger, it didn't make me want to, I mean, I was like, you know, quite fearless. And I was like, you know, fuck that. I still like did whatever I wanted to do. And like, yeah, please. And would go out, you know, I used to walk in my wheelchair like 6 hours a day. I'm sorry, 6 miles a day to go to school, go to my internship. and back. You know, my wheelchair really took a beating. It died after graduate school. But you know, over time, my life has become more and more populated with people that, you know, I trust, that respect me, that I have respect for, that I love, that I would do anything for, you know, and less and less populated with like the general world, you know, because the general world is, especially since COVID, is gross. You know, we just had our 651st mass shooting in 2021 yesterday. Just in 2021, 651 mass shootings in the US. And it was a school shooting. Like, I'm cool. I don't need to go hang out with random people anymore.
Yeah.
It's shocking. It is shocking. I don't even understand. I don't understand like what is wrong. And a lot of it, quite honestly, is male violence. You know, I'm just gonna call it what it is. You don't see like, you know, very many like femme presenting people going and shooting up schools. You know, it's disgruntled boys, it's disgruntled white boys. And I don't know what's wrong with them. Yeah. I mean, I could go on a litany of what could be, but like that's, you know, I don't want to populate my thoughts with pathologizing people, because I know with, you know, it's never helped me for people to pathologize me.
I mean, I guess it's a mental illness, isn't it? I mean, people that are well don't do that sort of thing, do they?
No, but I mean, I don't want to cast that upon people that, you know, have psychiatric impairments, that they're likely to do violent things either, you know.
Yeah.
I think I honestly think it's entitlement.
Gun culture too.
I'm sorry, gun culture,
It's
yeah.
gun culture too, you know. I mean, I think we live in such
Yeah,
a
yeah.
I'm in Texas where people, you know, my son works at Walmart and you know, people carry openly here. And he said that this dude, you know, was like at a customer and he's like, oh, I have my weapon, or, you know, I mean, people here like will point a weapon on your face at like the blink of an eye, they get pissed off, you know, which is like really scary. So it's gun culture, it's violence culture, but it's like, yeah, it's definitely male energy. Yeah.
And it's privilege. And I really think it's, you know, media supported. It's been supported by federal, you know, figures, specifically like Trump and his aggro, you know, like, if I don't agree with you, I have the right to hurt you. You know, I just have the right to hurt you because like, it's just, it's people are not well. If people were well, you know, like spiritually, you know, and then in community and, you know, et cetera, I think there would be, we couldn't do what we have done to each other, you know. We couldn't do what we've done to the land. It's very difficult in the US to get access to a relationship with the land because it's really developed. It's very developed. And I mean, you know, the land and the trees like that grounds people. And a lot of people have no access to it. There are people who've never seen, who really never, if you live in a city, there are so many people have never seen like a, you know, like a grove of trees. You know, it's a really overdeveloped area. And places that people aren't living on are still cemented over. It's wild. Yeah. The US is a fun place to visit because of people.
Yeah.
There's some really awesome people here. Just like there's some really not awesome people. But, and there's some beautiful places, but you know, the US is not, I would say, compared to other, from what I've heard in other places, it's not an easy place to live.
Yeah.
My sister.
Swap interpreters, please.
I'm sorry?
Could we swap interpreters, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good to go.
Yeah, it certainly seems to hold the whole spectrum of everything imaginable, as everywhere does, but in a more exaggerated way. I'm just aware that we're probably moving into an opportunity for people outside to ask questions. Just wondering if anyone has any other questions for Patty and Maria?
Thank you, Lucy, for yours.
There's been a couple questions in the chat, which I can ask on people's behalf if there's nothing live just yet. The first is, art has the power to be a vehicle for change, to make people think, feel, act. What do you hope your work and actions leave the powers that be, non-disabled decision makers, thinking, feeling, acting upon?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's an awesome question. Is it okay if I try to answer
Please.
that? I think that highlighting the value of our humanity, it's perhaps one of the most important aspects of what we're capable of doing through art, and the message that we want to send to the people who have political power, because it is very easy for the oppressor to keep oppressing certain populations and certain groups of people if they dehumanize us, which is what happened with slavery. I think that people tended to rationalize and justify the acts of slavery behind religion, behind, so the same thing happens when you dehumanize disabled people and you see us less than or disposable, then society will continue to just throw us away. And I think that through the vein of our art, the power of our art, we're capable of carrying that message of the value of our humanity. Even after we're gone from this world, the voices spoken through our artistic expressions will continue to speak for those who need that message. So I think that for me personally as an artist, my responsibility, my artistic responsibility is to utilize the power of my art to fuel change and love for disabled people so that other people can see it. When other people recognize our humanity, then all of us will also begin to see it. Ableism has pushed us so much into believing that we're worthless, into believing that we don't deserve to be part of the rest of the world. So our art, disabled artists, our voices are carrying forward that message that other disabled people can hang on to, so we can keep fighting to have our humanity recognized. I hope that kind of answers the question.
I think that's a great answer.
I wanted to actually show an example of something. Someone asked in the chat that we have access to, Izzy, can you guys give an example of how you might represent covert microaggression through your art? And, we work, like I said, with a variety of artists, and one of them who's just magnificent, his name is Micah Bazant, and he's a trans artist that has done some work that people might be familiar with. And he's worked with the Trans Day of Liberation, and in the campaign, Refugees Are Welcome Here. And we're going to pull it up on the screen now. And it's about Mario Woods, who was a disabled man who was killed. And it says, "Justice for Mario Woods." There's a yellow background with black, and it's an illustration, a black man with a cap, a black shirt over a white shirt, and really tender, beautiful eyes. And he has a goatee, and there's writing on the background that says over 50% of people killed by police are disabled. Disability Justice Now, hashtag Black Disabled Lives Matter. No comprehensive federal data is available, is collected, but available reports show at least half of those killed by police have psych disabilities. These statistics do not include people with mobility, sensory, or developmental impairments, or people who are neurodivergent or sick/chronically ill. And when we add people that have who are sensory minority, or have sensory impairments, specifically people that are deaf and people with developmental disabilities, it is much higher. And this is specific to the US, that over half the people killed by police are disabled. And so if we can take that down. So this is one example of, when we are not having performances, we will do social media campaigns where that gets circulated around. For example, people buy the posters. We will make stickers and posters and, icons that people will spread around and around, which is fantastic. And so we've done those kind of campaigns. We have a lot of disability justice related graphics that people can find in our Flipkart store.
Awesome.
And also, Patty, remember, I believe it was during our Birthing, Dying, Becoming Crip Wisdom show that we had the whole gallery highlighting art by various disabled artists who had been doing work from their beds and from sending the message to the world that disabled people are productive and busy and living and thriving and doing and speaking up and resisting and surviving from our crib beds, from our wheelchairs, from our bathtubs, from wherever we may happen to be.
Right.
Wherever we may happen to be oppressed and confined, we're still finding ways to liberate ourselves through our artistic voices and through our creativity. And during that show, and also during various other shows, I know that Sins Invalid has had in the lobby visual art representing the lives of different disabled people and various, experiences of our crib life. So art is definitely so powerful and a vein that we utilize through the work that we do, not only on stage, but also beyond and
so
along with everything that we do.
And obviously that's not a microaggression, that's a macro aggression. But, I think, we've done like a whole range of like the crib bed life, it just represented, for those of us that were in bed that year, which included me, like we represented just ourselves and our lives and our different visions. Suzanne, you were talking about, do we vision forward? And we were visioning a life where we were all connected, even in our beds. And, it was actually really awesome because some of us took photos, like mine was a photo series of me in my bed. And other people had music they had created from their bed. It was really quite fun that year. So, again, just kind of to echo Maria's point that, we're, and in answer to your question, Suzanne, like we're constantly like imagining all the ways that we're connected, in order to survive and in order to just like have fun and be human, like that's what like art supports, is just the creative process. It can be really fun, if we can approach it as an experiment and not like, oh, I have to judge myself. If I had to think that, because I've never trained as an artist, I was trained as a therapist, and I have a lot of experience in political organizing. And if I had to think that like, oh, I have to do art now, like I think I would stress out a lot. But I don't. I'm like experimenting and playing, and then it's just fun, and people can call it whatever they want. I mean, if people consider that artistic work, that's great. And I like the way that, I like what it connotates. But I mean, that's just playing, you know, it's relaxing. Yeah. Sorry, Izzy, was there another question? Do we have time for another question, or do we have to wrap up?
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but there are two quite speedy questions that we might try and get to. The first one is, you've spoken a lot about disability justice. This is a term more commonly used in North America than here in Aotearoa. What are some resources you would recommend a kind of first time comer to this phrase, to this work? You know, what are some books or first time resources to open up on?
Well, we have a disability justice primer called Skin, Tooth, and Bone. The basis of our movement is our people, and we can drop the link for that in the chat. It's it's a flip cause store basically, and it's yeah, people can buy the primer. If you can't afford it, then you can reach out to us at info@sinsinvalid.org. I don't remember what the conversion rate is. Yeah, but it's not very expensive by US standards. It's like, yeah, what maybe 2 cups of coffee would cost in the US if you wanted hard copy, and maybe 1 cup of coffee otherwise if you want it electronically. And it's by the end of next year, we'll have it in Spanish as well. There's also the 10 Principles of Disability Justice, which we can drop in the chat. That's free. There's a working draft of disability justice that's on our blog. And so there are resources on the website, and it's also in sign language on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page.
And we also, of course, we also have the Sins Invalid documentary.
Yes.
And we have the Crip Kinship book, which is also gives you a wonderful, we talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking. I muted myself.
Unfortunately, I think that is all we have time for. We've gone quite over time, which is never a big issue when the conversation is this engaging. But thank you all again for joining, and I'll pass it over to the 3 of you for final last words.
Can I say thank you, Izzy and Suzanne, and all of the people at Touch Compass, and Rodney, who works with Touch Compass and has also worked with Sins Invalid, for connecting us, and for your excitement about the work and about sharing the work. And I would love to do more collaborations with you all. It's been really a joy. So thank you so much. And to the audience, thank you. I'm sure you could be.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. It's been such a pleasure, and yeah, really appreciate it. And please do check out the Sins Invalid website, as you will find disability justice resources that you can definitely take advantage of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty and Maria. That was the most wonderful discussion, and yes to future collaborations.
Yeah.
For sure, we're excited too. Thank you.
Maria, you are such a joy. I love you.
I love you more.
Well, once again, thank you on behalf of Touch Compass, and for our audience watching, if you'd like a copy of this recording or have any questions or comments, give me an email at producer@touchcompass.org.nz, and we'll try and answer any questions you have. Again, give us a couple of days and we'll be posting this with a transcript and all the amazing links that Karina has shared with us in the chat. And so to wrap us all up, I'll pass it back to John to end us with a closing karakia.
Kia ora, Izzy. Look, we join webinars like this to get gems of knowledge, and I think we can all acknowledge here today that there's been some absolute diamonds coming from the two of you. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou to you, Maria, and to you, Patty. It's been a beautiful session to have open ears and open minds. And I'll close this with a quick karakia, kind of appropriate one actually. Kia whakaria te tapu, kia wātea atiara, kia tūriki whakataa ai, kia tūriki whakataa ai. Haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. A quick translation, that which restricts us is removed. The pathway is now open. We return to our everyday and allied together as one as a result of today's kōrero. Again, ngā mihi nui, kia kōrua, kia ora.
Ngā mihi, John.